Zareen Almas thought she had found the man who would change her life, but Helio Drexler had already decided how her story would end. Zareen Almas boarded a plane to Berlin, believing Helio Drexler was her future. She had no idea he was planning to erase her past. Helio Drexler knew exactly what he wanted from Zareen Almas, and it wasn't love. Zareen Almas trusted Helio Drexler with her dreams, but he saw her as nothing more than his next transaction. Helio Drexler built the perfect lie, and Zareen Almas walked straight into it. Zareen Almas arrived in Berlin expecting safety. Helio Drexler was waiting with something far more dangerous. Helio Drexler's smile pulled Zareen Almas in. His secrets almost destroyed her. Zareen Almas believed Helio Drexler had rescued her from loneliness. In truth, he was leading her into the darkest trap of her life. Helio Drexler wasn't the savior Zareen Almas hoped for. He was the predator she never saw coming. Zareen Almas followed Helio Drexler across continents, unaware that every step brought her closer to his hidden empire. Zareen Almas had always imagined her life turning into something brighter. After years spent moving from one job to another in Karachi, she accepted a position in Dubai that promised stability and a chance to reinvent herself. The city felt overwhelming at first. Its towering buildings, fast-paced lifestyle, and endless competition weighed heavily on her. She spent most evenings in her small studio apartment, scrolling through social media or browsing online communities for expats who understood the challenges of living far from home. One night, while reading posts on a forum about adjusting to life in Dubai, she noticed someone who stood out. His username was Helio Drexler, and his profile was unlike anyone else's. He wrote with confidence, posted polished photos of his trips around Europe, and often offered advice to newcomers without sounding arrogant. His pictures showed him dining in elegant restaurants, walking through luxury shopping districts, and leaning casually on expensive cars. Everything about his online presence gave the impression of a man who had built a successful and comfortable life. Zareen rarely interacted with strangers online, but something about Helio felt safe. His comments were supportive and thoughtful, and he responded to people with surprising patience. When he replied to one of her posts about homesickness, she felt a strange warmth. His words made her feel understood in a city that often left her feeling invisible. Their exchanges gradually increased. At first, they were short responses to public posts, but soon Helio began sending her private messages. He asked about her job, her struggles, and what she hoped to achieve. Zareen found herself sharing more than she expected. She told him about her family back home, her loneliness in Dubai, and her dreams of living somewhere quieter, somewhere she could feel safe and appreciated. Helio seemed to know exactly what she needed to hear. He talked about Berlin as a place of opportunity and peace, describing its culture, safety, and endless possibilities. He wrote about his own life, how he had built his small business from nothing, how he believed in giving people a chance, and how he admired her determination to start over in a foreign country. Zareen began to look forward to his messages more than anything else. They arrived at the perfect moments, during long nights when she couldn't sleep, early mornings before work, and quiet weekends when she felt most alone. She reread them often, feeling comforted by his attention. Without realizing it, she started planning her day around the hope that he would message again. Eventually, Helio suggested that she visit Berlin. He said she deserved a place where she could grow without fear or pressure. He offered to help her find a job, arrange her stay, and guide her through the transition. Zareen hesitated at first, unsure if she was reading too much into his gestures, but Helio assured her that he simply wanted to help her find a better life, insisting she had potential she wasn't able to use in Dubai. Slowly, she allowed herself to believe him. She imagined herself walking through quiet German streets, breathing in cool air, and leaving behind every disappointment she had experienced. She told herself it wasn't about him, but about the opportunity he was offering. When he finally offered to cover her travel expenses, she convinced herself it was a genuine care. She told friends she had met someone kind, though she left out most details, unsure how they would react. Inside, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear, but the excitement won. Zareen booked her flight with his help, packed her few belongings, and promised herself this move would change everything. She looked out the airplane window during takeoff, believing she was flying toward a better future. What she didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that Helio Drexler was nothing like the man she thought she knew. She was stepping into a world carefully crafted for her, a world built on lies, and a world from which escape would soon become a desperate struggle. The moment Zareen stepped into Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, she felt both overwhelmed and hopeful. The air was colder, the atmosphere quieter, and everything seemed strangely orderly compared to the noise and heat of Dubai. She scanned the crowd with nervous eyes, searching for the face she had only seen in pictures. When she finally spotted Helio, standing near the exit with a calm posture and her name written neatly on a small card, she felt a wave of relief. He looked exactly as he appeared online, well-groomed, confident, and surprisingly warm. Helio greeted her with a polite smile and took her luggage without hesitation. The car he arranged was not one of the luxury vehicles she had seen in his photos, but she assumed he had chosen something simple for convenience. As they drove through the city, Zareen marveled at the tall buildings, quiet streets, and the soft winter light that painted everything with a subdued glow. Helio explained small details about Berlin, talking about its history and culture. His voice was steady, giving her the impression that he was in complete control of his environment. When they arrived at the apartment, Zareen noticed it was simpler than she expected. The building was older and lacked the elegance she had seen in Helio's photos of his supposed penthouse. He explained the penthouse was being renovated and that they would move in soon. His tone held such certainty that she pushed aside her doubts. She reminded herself she was in a new city, a new country, and things would take time to settle. The first 2 days passed quietly. Helio brought her groceries, arranged a small corner for her belongings, and even made her tea while she adjusted to the time difference. He checked in on her often, asking if she needed anything. Zareen felt grateful, believing she had found someone dependable. But small changes in his behavior began to appear. On the second evening, he asked for her passport, saying he needed to register her temporary stay with local authorities. She hesitated, but he reassured her that it was a normal requirement. Wanting to avoid trouble, she handed it over. When she later asked if she could keep it somewhere accessible, he insisted it was better with him. He said it was safer that way, especially in a foreign country, where losing documents could cause serious problems. Soon after, he suggested she limit her social media activity, claiming it was important to avoid unnecessary attention until her job paperwork was sorted. He added that Berlin was full of scams targeting newcomers, and that sharing her location or travel details could put her at risk. His reasoning seemed protective, but something about the firmness in his tone made her uneasy. Whenever she tried to step outside alone, Helio reminded her about the dangers of getting lost and said he preferred to accompany her until she became familiar with the city. She accepted this at first, telling herself he was being responsible, but the more time passed, the clearer it became that she was not allowed to leave without him. Days turned into a week, and Zareen began asking about the job he promised. Helio responded with vague explanations, paperwork delays, ongoing negotiations, or changes in company management. Every answer sounded polished but empty. Each time she asked again, his mood shifted slightly, becoming colder, irritated at her persistence. One night, while lying awake in the small room he had assigned her, she heard him speaking sharply on the phone. His voice was quieter than usual, almost tense. She missed most of the words, but a few terms pierced the silence and made her blood run cold. She heard him mention deliveries, schedules, and an upcoming arrival. The tone was businesslike, but nothing about it felt safe. She tried to convince herself she was overthinking, that she was simply tired and stressed, but deep down, fear began to take root. She noticed Helio kept multiple locked drawers, that he never left his phone unattended, and that he always seemed to be waiting for a message. Every time she tried to ask a direct question, he switched the topic effortlessly. His charm remained, but it felt forced now, like a mask slipping at the edges. Zareen realized she knew almost nothing about the man who controlled her documents, her movement, and her future. She had crossed countries for a fresh start, and instead found herself trapped in a life that felt more uncertain with each passing hour.
Zareen waited until the apartment felt silent before beginning her search. She had no clear plan, only a growing sense that something was wrong and getting worse with each passing day. Helio had left earlier than usual, saying he had urgent matters to handle. His hurried tone made her uneasy, but it also gave her a small window of time. She moved slowly at first, listening carefully for any sign of his return. The apartment felt colder than usual, as if the walls themselves were hiding secrets. She started with the living room, checking drawers, cabinets, and shelves. Most held nothing but ordinary items, old magazines, mismatched cables, and a few unopened envelopes. But she noticed something strange. Every area seemed too orderly. There were no personal items, no signs of a life actually lived there. It looked like a space maintained for temporary use, as if countless others had passed through before her. Her heartbeat quickened when she approached the large wooden cabinet near the hallway. She had seen Helio use it several times, always locking it afterward. The lock was small and old, but sturdy. She tugged at the handles, and the doors rattled in place. With a deep breath, she tried the hairpin she had tucked into her sleeve earlier. It took longer than expected, and her hands trembled so badly she had to stop twice. After several tense minutes, the lock finally clicked open. Inside, she found several folders stacked neatly. Each one had a number written on the front, nothing else. She opened them slowly, unsure of what she might find. The first folder contained a passport that didn't belong to Helio, at least not the Helio she knew. The name was different, the hair color lighter, the facial features altered just enough to create confusion. The second folder held another ID, this time with a completely different name and profession. Zareen's stomach tightened as she continued flipping through them. Some documents were real, others forged, but they all pointed to one terrifying truth. Helio lived under multiple identities. A small metal box sat in the back of the cabinet. Inside were photographs, at least 20 of them. Each photo showed a different woman standing in the very apartment where she now lived. None of them smiled. Some looked scared, others resigned, and their surroundings looked identical to her current environment. A few of the women appeared with luggage, others without. The more she looked, the clearer it became. She was one in a long line. Zareen felt dizzy. She grabbed the wall to steady herself, the photos sliding from her shaking hands. She forced herself to pick them up and keep searching, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Behind the stacks of papers, she noticed a small black USB drive taped to the cabinet's base. She removed it carefully, her fingers trembling. After checking that the hallway was still empty, she plugged the USB drive into the apartment's television, hoping it was not password protected. The screen lit up with a list of video files. Each file name was coded with dates, locations, and initials. She clicked on the first video.
It showed Helio, looking slightly different with darker hair, speaking to a woman who appeared nervous. The footage followed the same pattern she had experienced herself: the promises, the arrival, the isolation. Zareen clicked through more videos, feeling her breath grow shallow. In one, a woman was transported to a second location. In another, Helio counted large stacks of cash while someone else filmed. The last video nearly made her drop the remote. It was labeled with her name. The footage included her arrival date, her background details, and Helio discussing her value with a faceless man whose voice was muffled. She shut off the TV abruptly, her body shaking. Tears blurred her vision, but she wiped them away with determination. Every doubt she had ignored now roared back in full force. She was not a guest, she was merchandise. The remaining minutes felt endless as she gathered everything she could: her phone, the USB drive, and the smallest bag she could carry. The truth was out, and she had no more time left to pretend. She needed to escape before Helio returned. As she looked one last time at the life she had thought she had chosen, a chilling understanding settled over her. She was never meant to leave this place on her own terms. Zareen pressed her ear against the apartment door, listening for any sound in the hallway. The silence outside felt both comforting and terrifying. She didn't know how much time she had before Helio returned, only that every second mattered. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared someone might hear it. The small bag she carried felt almost useless, containing only the USB drive, her phone, and a few essential items. She wished she had her passport, but the locked drawer refused to open no matter how hard she tried. She had no choice now but to leave without it. She cracked the door open and stepped into the hallway. The lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows that made her feel watched even when no one was there. She moved quietly, resisting the urge to run. Every footstep echoed too loudly in her ears. When she reached the stairwell, she descended quickly, gripping the railing to steady herself. She avoided the elevator, terrified that Helio or someone working with him might catch her inside. Outside, the cold Berlin air stung her face. For a moment she stood frozen, unsure where to go. The streets were unfamiliar, and her sense of direction was clouded by panic. She pulled up her phone, but immediately realized it was still connected to the apartment's Wi-Fi. If Helio tracked her device, and she suspected he did, he might already know she had left. She turned off the phone and slipped it into her pocket, feeling completely cut off from any sense of safety. Zareen walked quickly down the street, turning corners without thinking, hoping to disappear into the busy city. Her breathing grew uneven as fear clawed at her chest. She didn't know the neighborhood, didn't understand the signs, and wasn't sure if she was heading toward people or danger. After several minutes that felt like hours, she spotted a small cafe with warm lighting and people inside. She rushed toward it, pulling the door open with trembling hands. Inside, the cafe felt like another world: quiet conversations, the smell of coffee, and people going about their lives without fear. Zareen approached the counter, unable to speak clearly. The staff immediately noticed her distress, and although she struggled to form sentences, they guided her to a chair and offered a glass of water. She gestured helplessly, trying to explain that she needed help, pointing toward the street and shaking her head. A woman behind the counter nodded sympathetically and reached for her phone to contact local authorities. For a brief moment, Zareen allowed herself to breathe. But then she glanced out the cafe window, and her blood ran cold. A dark car had pulled up across the street. The driver stepped out, wearing a hood, but even through the glass and distance, she recognized the familiar stiffness in his posture. It was Helio. He scanned the street methodically, as if he knew she was nearby. Zareen stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair. Panic surged through her. She hurried toward the back of the cafe, motioning to the staff that she needed to leave immediately. She pushed through the kitchen door and found an exit leading into an alley. The cold hit her again as she ran, her shoes slipping on the wet pavement. The alley ended with a tall metal fence. She looked behind her, certain she heard footsteps. Without thinking, she climbed the fence, scraping her hand on the rough metal. When she landed on the other side, pain shot up her arm, but she pushed forward, fueled by fear. She raced through a narrow pathway until she emerged onto a residential street. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to keep moving. She didn't know where she was until she spotted something that gave her hope, a police patrol car parked near the corner. Summoning the last of her strength, she ran toward it, waving frantically. The officers saw her approaching, recognized her distress, and quickly escorted her inside the patrol car. She tried to speak, but her words came out broken and frightened. Still, the officers didn't hesitate. They drove her to the nearest station and offered immediate protection. By the time authorities went to the apartment, Helio had already vanished. The apartment was clean, with no trace of his identity or the evidence Zareen had found. She had escaped with her life, but he had escaped with far more.
The investigation into Helio's disappearance began immediately, but the clues he left behind were thin, scattered, and deliberately misleading. Zareen's testimony provided a starting point, yet authorities quickly discovered that nearly everything related to him was a constructed illusion. The name Helio Drexler led nowhere. There were no official records, no permanent addresses, and no legitimate business registrations tied to him. Every document Zareen had seen in the apartment pointed to a man who lived through false identities, each carefully designed to dissolve before anyone could trace them. Interpol soon became involved when investigators realized the scale of the operation. Digital forensics experts examined the USB drives Zareen had saved, uncovering encrypted files and hidden folders she had not accessed. These contained travel logs, coded transactions, and a list of overseas contacts. Each name corresponded to individuals suspected of involvement in trafficking networks across Europe and the Middle East. The drive became a crucial piece of evidence, linking various cases that had previously seemed isolated. Other victims began coming forward after media outlets reported the story. Women from Poland, Turkey, India, and Romania contacted authorities, describing eerily similar experiences: online charm, promises of work abroad, and sudden isolation upon arrival. Some had escaped, while others had simply disappeared from public records. Their stories formed a chilling pattern mirroring Zareen's, proving Helio had been operating for years under different identities without ever being caught. Zareen entered a protection program soon after giving her full statement. Authorities placed her in a secure residential facility where counselors and social workers helped her rebuild a sense of safety. The trauma ran deep, leaving her with nightmares, distrust of strangers, and moments of overwhelming fear triggered by small things: a knock on the door, footsteps in a hallway, the sound of a car slowing outside. The staff reassured her daily, but the shadows of what she had nearly fallen victim to clung tightly to her. Despite her emotional struggles, Zareen remained determined to help the investigation. She reviewed photos, recorded statements, and identified locations and details only she recognized. Her courage provided direction for investigators who had been chasing fragmented clues for years. Through her cooperation, several safe houses used by the network were uncovered. Authorities performed coordinated raids across Germany and neighboring countries, arresting multiple associates connected to the trafficking ring. These arrests delivered small victories, but one grim fact persisted: Helio, the operation's central figure, remained unaccounted for. Months passed, and Zareen slowly began creating a routine. She attended therapy sessions, learned basic German, and enrolled in online courses to prepare for a new career.
Her trust in people grew cautiously. She formed connections with other women in protective custody, all victims of similar manipulations. Their shared experiences created an unspoken bond, helping each other navigate the difficult process of healing. Meanwhile, international law enforcement kept searching. Several reported sightings of a man resembling Helio emerged from cities such as Vienna, Prague, and Oslo. Each report triggered rapid action, but by the time authorities arrived, he had already vanished, leaving behind nothing but faint traces: surveillance footage showing a man walking alone at night, hotel records with a false name, or a ride-hailing transaction linked to a prepaid device. He seemed to anticipate every move against him. Zareen, though safer now, lived with the unsettling awareness that he might still be watching. Investigators assured her that she was protected, but the knowledge that someone capable of such calculated deception was free haunted her. Even as she tried to build a future, a part of her remained alert, listening for warnings her instincts had missed the first time. Her story eventually became part of a public awareness campaign about online romance scams and trafficking risks. She agreed to share her experience anonymously, hoping to protect others from falling into similar traps. The campaign gained traction, prompting discussions worldwide about digital safety, manipulation tactics, and the importance of recognizing early warning signs. Yet one detail continued to unsettle everyone involved. In several statements from new victims, the man they described had Helio's mannerisms, his voice, and his signature charm, but always a different name, always a slightly altered appearance. The pattern was undeniable, and the implication chilling. Helio had not stopped. He had simply moved on to his next identity, his next victim, and his next carefully constructed lie. And somewhere out there, behind another polished smile and perfect profile photo, he was already beginning again.
Months turned into a year, and although Zareen had tried to move forward, the shadow of Helio never truly left her. She lived in a small, guarded residence assigned by the protection program, surrounded by tall fences and monitored by discreet security cameras. The world outside seemed vast and unpredictable, while the space inside felt like a fragile sanctuary. She followed routines meant to restore her sense of normalcy: morning walks within the compound, afternoon therapy sessions, online classes at night. But the fear lingered like a faint bruise that refused to fade. Meanwhile, authorities continued to gather information from across Europe. Investigators discovered traces of activity connected to Helio: encrypted transfers, abandoned apartments rented under fake names, and anonymous reports from women who had narrowly escaped dangerous encounters. Each clue hinted that he was still active, adapting, and expanding his methods. Although they came close several times, he always seemed one step ahead, disappearing before anyone could confirm his identity. One evening, Zareen received a visit from a senior investigator named Maren Volk, a woman known for handling complex cross-border cases. Maren brought new updates. Authorities had uncovered 2 additional safe houses where women had been held temporarily before being moved elsewhere. These discoveries not only validated Zareen's warnings, but also revealed the scale of the network. Yet Helio's central role remained frustratingly elusive. Each digital footprint led to another false identity, another region, or another dead end. Zareen listened, overwhelmed by both dread and determination. Every new piece of information felt like a reminder of how narrowly she had escaped. And yet she felt responsible for helping dismantle the network. The investigators relied on her memory and instincts, especially when reviewing recovered photos and documents. Her insights identified patterns others had missed: recurring symbols, routine meeting points, certain recruitment strategies. She became an important resource, though the emotional toll was heavy.
Meanwhile, the media continued to report on the case. Documentaries, podcasts, and online articles dissected every new development. Zareen remained anonymous, protected by law, but she couldn't avoid the growing public fascination. Messages of support poured into anti-trafficking organizations, while others demanded answers about how someone like Helio could evade capture for so long. Public attention pressured authorities to intensify their efforts, but it also raised the stakes for everyone involved. As weeks passed, Zareen began noticing small changes in her surroundings. A new security guard replaced one who had been there for months. A vehicle unfamiliar to her appeared outside the compound gate several times. A staff member reported strange calls with no one speaking on the other end. Each incident seemed insignificant on its own, but together they created a pattern that unsettled her. At night, she struggled to sleep. She imagined footsteps outside her window, shadows moving where there were none, and the faint echo of a voice she wished to forget. Her therapist explained that such hypervigilance was normal after trauma, but Zareen sensed something deeper, something real. One afternoon, during a routine check-in, Maren revealed that a new lead had surfaced. A woman in Denmark had reported a man who matched Helio's features, recruiting in online communities under a different name, Orion Falco. The messages he sent were eerily familiar, nearly identical to the ones Zareen had received years earlier. When authorities contacted the woman for more details, she reported something even more unsettling. The man seemed to know she had spoken to the police. Shortly afterward, he vanished. That night, Zareen sat in her small room, staring at the walls. The realization settled over her slowly, like a chilling fog. Helio was not just slipping through the cracks, he was watching them, anticipating their moves, adjusting his strategies. He understood how investigations worked, how victims behaved, and how authorities responded. His disappearance was not luck, it was deliberate. And then a new thought emerged, so terrifying she struggled to breathe. He might be watching her, too. Not directly, not physically, but from a distance, waiting for the right moment, observing the case through carefully hidden channels. She imagined him reading reports, monitoring online discussions, and quietly tracking anyone who had escaped him. She stood up, unable to sit still, her pulse racing. The fear she had worked so hard to overcome flooded back with brutal intensity. And for the first time in months, she realized something with absolute clarity. Her escape had never been the end. It had only been the beginning of a much larger game, one Helio was still playing. And he wasn't finished.